we've got vibewriting. I think that's on the docket. Making our way through phase 9. I did a ton of organization. We are down to 46 pages. We got to get this as low as possible. For reference, the last video essay was 20 pages, and that was about 40 some minutes. So, can we do it here? All right, first I want to check out this idea of self-model theory of subjectivity. Can you help me understand Thomas Metzinger's self-model theory of subjectivity and ego tunnel? What does that provide that Emil Seth doesn't get at in his Being You book? Are there any additional interesting insights or studies or anything that would help me out? That would, I guess there's no context here of what helping me out would mean. I'll just do anything. All right, the idea or the question is, do we actually need to use this guy? Do we want to use this guy? He's come up multiple times in our notes now, but I'm not sure how important that is. Also, hopefully we work up to this post hoc rationalization, which is actually, that's going to be kind of way later. So maybe we just jump over there. To understand Thomas Metzinger's work, we have to start with a stark, rigorously eliminativist premise. There is no such thing as a self in the world. Nobody has a self and nobody is a self. Instead, what exists is a biological data processing system that generates a constant dynamic simulation of the world. And within that simulation, it generates an avatar representing an organism. Right, though I think Anil Seth goes a little bit farther in terms of describing what we would mean if we were talking about the feeling of being a self. Like, we're not going to just go to some ontological conclusion. We're going to actually describe, all right, why do we feel like we are a self? And if this fails to do that, then we're kicking him out. Metzinger's theory is built on a few critical concepts from philosophy of mind and cognitive science. The phenomenal self model. The brain doesn't just map the external environment, it creates a highly integrated internal map of the organism. Right, though we have to be careful about this type of talk because it makes it seem like this is what becomes conscious to us, and that's not always necessarily the case. The brain doesn't always make conscious the underlying processes. Okay, transparency. This is Metzinger's most crucial mechanism in philosophy of perception, and transparent representation is one where you look through the medium directly at the content. Think of a perfectly clean window, blah, 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 blah. Because the brain's self-model is phenomenally transparent, the system cannot recognize that it is operating a model. It collapses the distinction between the map and the territory. Therefore, the system identifies with the model. That's a big jump. That's a big jump. Therefore, the system identifies with the model is a big jump. Ego tunnel. Because we cannot perceive the neural mechanisms generating our experience, opacity, we are trapped in a simulation. We are in an ego tunnel, a virtual reality created by our brain. Okay. Anil Seth does this so much better. I think. More effectively, I should say. I need to actually look at my chat here. Okay. We're chilling. We're ready. Anil Seth's Being You popularized the concept of controlled hallucination, right? This is going to be our competing explanation that's basically saying the same thing, but it carries a little more weight. I think the controlled aspect of this carries a lot of weight. Via predictive processing, Seth argues that the brain constantly predicts sensory inputs to minimize surprise, and that the self is just another controlled hallucination, primarily rooted in keeping our internal biology alive. All right. While they are complementary, in fact, predictive processing is essentially the mechanism by which Metzinger's self-model operates. Metzinger provides several philosophical and structural dimensions that Seth largely bypasses. Okay, what does that mean? So the primary framework, Thomas Metzinger is in philosophy land, where Nils Seth is in neuroscience land. Core focus, what the structural properties of conscious experience are and why it fools us. Okay. This is going to also fall subservient to this view. This is the more fundamental way of going about even the philosophy here. The ontology of the self, pragmatic, the self is a biological utility, right? And then this is a limitativist. So this is also going to fall. And subject-object mapping. Okay. Here we go. Metzinger doesn't just explain the self in the world, he explains how they interact. This models the relationship between the subject and the object. When you reach for a coffee cup, your brain isn't just modeling the cup in your hand, it actively models the arrow of intentionality. Okay, right, absolutely. This is all covered by Seth, though. Empirical grounding. Yeah, so this is maybe the only thing that we can gain here. OBEs, we don't care. Rubber hand. Okay, so is Metzinger the rubber hand guy? Is Metzinger the rubber? Oh no, wait, these are all from other people. Never mind. Bochnamik and Cohen. Yo, the daily routine of a top 10 male. Are we gonna find out step 5 today? I've been on the edge of my seat. Lucid dreaming. Okay. This isn't giving us much. We got to cut him. Thomas Metzinger. For that reason, I'm out. Okay, so we're getting to this point where we're talking about... Oh, I have to find my notes now. Did I say all my notes here? No. I said all my notes here? Nope. This is it. This is what we got. Wrote a novel over here. Okay, so we do that. We go through that. Step 5, open a controversial philosophy or sociology book I think is profound. Agree with everything it says. So everything you think is profound? Oh, you're saying that each person does one that they think is profound. They don't have to find a book that you think is profound. Agree with everything it says. Come to adopt a Christian moral view anyhow, because no one can escape the Spenglerian age. Okay. It's what's that guy's name? It's a Russell Brandian age now. Step 6, most important part, breakfast. Absolutely. All right, let's actually just walk through what's leading up to where I need to start. What did I call it? Vibewriting. I don't know why I haven't said this before. Vibe coding's been a concept for like a year, and I haven't talked about vibewriting. Maybe it's because I haven't actually like worked heavy on the document since last summer. Russell Brandian age is wild. What does that even mean? I don't know. I just heard he was in the news for messing up a Bible verse or something like that. Okay, so phase 9. This comes after we talk about that whole free energy stuff, allostasis. I've been saying it for a while. Everyone's probably sick of hearing it. But this is the more fun part, right? This is the payoff of everything we've discussed. I'm going to make this more a little, not verbose. What's the word? I don't know. Normal writing. There's a word for that. Now that we know how the brain works, we can make sense of why it feels the way it does. Oh yeah, dude. Converted to Christianity after getting finessed, right? Yep, that seems like a... That's another one of those things with Jordan Peterson where it's like... Something's got to be up there. I think that some like classically like good people, right? Just like a good-natured person, they really value social virtues. And thus, it's hard for them to betray someone. But the problem is they're in this space and they have huge influence. And so now once you become friends with someone like that, or a Dave Rubin, then you now have this like unconscious, what did I call it? An unconscious bias? Yeah, I guess you've now incorporated unconscious biases that are going to affect how you think. And that is very dangerous. Especially if you're a type of figure like Jordan Peterson. So we got to be careful. We got to be careful who we become cozied up with. I don't know about you, but if I'm close to someone and they say some bombastic stuff that I find bizarre, I'm not converting. Right? Yeah, the question is how close do you get, and then how bombastic is the stuff, and then like it gets crazier if your audience is down with that bombastic stuff. Like maybe you turned your head and boom, your audience now doesn't care about that bombastic stuff. So you got to be watching out for your audience. So we'll keep our heads on a swivel, our eyes peeled, and our noses open. Okay, so I'm going to start off with that same Wittgenstein thing we read yesterday. I think this is where we're going to actually use it to prepare us for this discussion. We can once again follow Anilseth's book, Being You, by highlighting a famous historical exchange between the philosopher Wittgenstein and his colleague Elizabeth. I'm saying Anscombe, but it's probably not that. I'll figure it out by the time I actually read it. So, what would it have looked like if the Earth... What would it have looked like if it had looked as if the Earth turned on its axis? The profound, uncomfortable answer is that it would look exactly the same. And then I want to say something more here, like our discussion has led us to the, has led us to ... Whatever. Our conscious experience does not grant us direct, unvarnished access to objective reality. The way things look or feel is not a transparent window into some objective universe. As we have discovered, our conscious perception is directly determined by an amalgamation of top-down predictions about hidden causes, continuously constrained and modulated by bottom-up sensory errors. It is a controlled hallucination, reflecting our brain's internal model and, incorporating our most recent discussion, a controlling hallucination, affecting our subsequent processing and therefore the trajectory of our internal model and conscious experience. Crucially, this suggests that no aspect of conscious experience is functionally useless or inconsequential. Consciousness is an expensive biological process. The specific information that reaches the level of conscious awareness does so because it was deemed important enough by the salience network to be globally broadcast across the brain. And it is broadcast for one fundamental thermodynamic purpose: to distribute highly abstracted information so the entire organism can coordinate its actions in service of allostasis. Crazy. All right. Now, when confronted with the idea that the brain generates its own reality, so this is a shout out to Energy Domter, wherever they are. When confronted with the idea that the brain generates its own reality, a common counter-argument emerges. Concern, I should say. If reality is subjective and my brain is just hallucinating all of this, why can't I just choose to see the sky as green? If it's all in my head, why don't I just jump off a cliff and hallucinate that I can fly? The answer lies in the fundamental difference between a mere hallucination and a controlled hallucination anchored by allostasis. We cannot simply choose to perceive a green sky or survive a fall off a cliff because our brain is not a detached, magical reality engine. It is a biological organ mathematically locked into minimizing expected free energy. The hallucination is strictly controlled by the ruthless laws of thermodynamics. If our brain were to randomly generate a hallucination of a green sky, it would create a massive systemic prediction error, capturing our attention that serves no allostatic purpose, wasting massive amounts of metabolic energy and potentially distracting us from something more important. Worse, if our brain decided to hallucinate that gravity didn't apply to us and we stepped off a cliff, we would die. Our body budget goes bankrupt and our system dissolves into entropy. The reason we consciously, viscerally feel that jumping off a cliff will hurt us is because it is in the absolute best interest of our entire distributed brain to be completely unified on that fact. We do not have the freedom to hallucinate whatever we want because we only consciously perceive what the brain determines is useful. Crazy. Okay. That's what happened to Obama. Oh no. Yo, 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 what's good, Dharmadam? We are doing well, absolutely. You came just in time. Hell yeah. All right, so that's the reason why we can't jump off the cliff, right? That's the reason why we can't just imagine things. In the same vein, we do not have an experience of predicting, of calculating thermodynamic math, or of consciously trying to minimize sensory errors to survive. Being consciously aware of the millions of micro predictions, sensory collisions, and precision weighting calculations happening in your cortex every second would be computationally bankrupting and biologically fatal. We do not need to know how our visual cortex builds a model of a predator. We just need to run away from it. Therefore, the brain hides its own processing and only broadcasts the final unified conclusion. All right, so those are all the answers to Energy Domter's questions yesterday, I think. I don't know what I meant by the Obama comment. It just sounded smart. Most things have happened to Obama. He's a seasoned gentleman. He's been around. Okay, intuitive aspects of experience. The result of this continuous prediction error minimizing loop is apparently the vivid, undeniable, conscious experience of being a stable self. I don't know if I need to say apparently. A stable self looking out at an objective world. Why? So I want to do a little blurb about how we can only consider/speculate why the brain decides to show us certain aspects of our experience. Here we will tackle some of the most intuitive and pervasive aspects. Remember that the brain's generative model is deeply hierarchical. The lowest levels of the nervous system process raw, chaotic sensory noise, the millions of fluctuating photons hitting the retina. But the higher levels of the brain do not care about photons. They care about the hidden causes of those stimuli. So rather than the chaotic stream of light, we experience an abstracted hidden cause, a solid chair sitting in a three-dimensional room. So I say probably more here. Oh, this is because I need to now take from my notes and see if I missed anything that I want to say in this story. And then I say move to after change talk. Yeah, the next few, this is all we have actually drafted, but we'll keep it going. Furthermore, we can consider that the brain models time to minimize expected free energy in the future, leading to the intuitive feeling of a past, causing a present that leads to a future. So this actually, I don't even like this framing. Yeah, we need a better introduction to the idea of time there. To understand, okay, so this is, we're talking about change now. To understand this, we must look at how and when the brain registers change. Notably, we must distinguish between changing perceptions and the conscious perception of change. Our eyes are constantly darting around, our head is moving, and lighting is shifting. Our sensory perceptions are physically changing rapidly every single second, yet the world feels stable because And then I was nervous because this implies some dualism. The brain actively edits out the noise. This is what it said. The brain actively edits out the noise, which implies some absolute outside world. It's like this is the physicalism talking to say that the brain actively edits out the noise, as if you were just to edit out the noise, you would then see the actual picture, which is not how the brain actually works. We only consciously perceive change when our brain's high-level model decides that an important change has occurred. All right. All right, cognitive neuroscientist Warwick Roseboom's research on time perception demonstrates that our brain doesn't have a centralized objective internal clock ticking away in the background. Instead, our feeling of time passing is an active prediction based on the accumulation of perceptual changes across our senses. When a high volume of perceptual events happens, the brain's model dictates that time is expanding. When nothing changes, time compresses. And then we'll use the study there where people reported busier videos as longer, even though they were the same length. All right, finally, because we now know that perception is action, we can make sense of countless psychological and phenomenological insights about how we perceive the objects in front of us. In the 1970s, ecological psychologist James J. Gibson coined the term affordances to describe what the environment offers the animal. He argued that we do not perceive objects neutrally or objectively, but rather we perceive them strictly in terms of how we can interact with them. When looking at a pen, shout out to the pen, our brain is not just passively mapping its cylindrical geometry, our motor cortex is simultaneously predicting the action of grasping the handle. We perceive the pen as graspable, as writable. When we look at a cliff edge, we do not perceive a neutral geological structure. We perceive a hazard. All right. Following our broader discussion, the conscious world is full of affordances rather than mere objects, a map of opportunities and threats, highlighting exactly what we can possibly do. All right, that's where we're left off. So, hidden causes generates do I want to make it more clear there? I'm going to just grab this, throw it here. Make sure I remember this. All right, we could ground this high-level priors and point out the highest level priors present in our everyday experience. Oh, this is something that we never ended up doing, right? Yeah. Then we could talk about the idea of change. So we got change here, making distinction between changes in perception and conscious perception of change. We can show a visual illusion. That's what we want to do. We often don't notice things that are changing. Then we could talk about time, the idea of time. Then we could look into affordances. Now I'm considering having a subsection on affect and emotions. That's what's going to happen here. But we need to do something like ground this in active inference. In other words, why would we experience the world like this? Leveraging active inference as a clue. Yo, Energy Daunter, what's good? 1 second, I gotta Unk, the primal urge to become a wise uncle. Absolutely. Yo, that's wild. Hey! I did enjoy the link, the video you linked. I thought it was very, very nice. Unfortunately, I'm a little more, I don't know, pessimistic about a lot of things, where hopefully someone making content like that is not like a drop in the bucket. But, you know, obviously, hopefully we get actual change. Hopefully that does affect some good change. It's nice to see a cool person out there. Okay. Energy Doctor, do you just, big things happening soon. Uh-oh, what does that mean? Did you get married? Are you getting married? We are planning something. Ooh, very nice. Energy Doctor, do you just show up? Because I want to read through the answer to your questions from yesterday. That sounds like a plot or something. That's not my intention. Okay. Okay. And no, I'm not getting married. No, I just showed up. All right. This is for you here. I'll read this just the intro here. So we got to the point where we're just saying, like, now that we know how the brain works, we can make sense of why it feels the way it does. We talk about that Wittgenstein set of quotes that kind of gets us in the mood. I don't know if you were here when I read them yesterday, so I'll just read it because it's such a banger. Why do people say that it was natural to think that the sun went around the earth rather than that the earth turned on its axis? And then Elizabeth Anscombe says, I suppose because it looked as if the sun went around the earth. And Wittgenstein says, well, what would it have looked like if it had looked as if the earth turned on its axis? And the profound, uncomfortable answer is that it would have looked exactly the same. All right. So we get to the point where we can say that our conscious experience, all that we have discussed now implies that our conscious experience does not grant us direct, unvarnished access to objective reality. The way things look or feel is not a transparent window into some objective universe. As we have discovered, our conscious perception is directly determined. Like we proved this. This was proved scientifically. Our conscious perception is directly determined by an amalgamation of top-down predictions about hidden causes, continuously constrained and modulated by bottom-up sensory errors. It is a controlled hallucination, reflecting our brain's internal model, and incorporating our most recent discussion, a controlling hallucination, affecting our subsequent processing and therefore the trajectory of our internal model and conscious experience. Crucially, this suggests that no aspect of conscious experience is functionally useless or inconsequential. Consciousness is an expensive biological process. The specific information that reaches the level of conscious awareness does so because it was deemed important enough by the salience network to be globally broadcast across the brain. And it broadcasts for one fundamental thermodynamic purpose: to distribute highly abstracted information so the entire organism can coordinate its actions in the service of allostasis. So here's what this is the actual response. Now, when confronted with the idea that the brain generates its own reality, a common concern emerges. If reality is subjective and my brain is just hallucinating all this, why can't I just choose to see the sky as green? If it's all in my head, why don't I just jump off a cliff and hallucinate that I can fly? The answer lies in the fundamental difference between a mere hallucination and a controlled hallucination anchored by allostasis. We cannot simply choose to perceive a green sky or survive a fall off of a cliff because our brain is not a detached magical reality engine. It is a biological organ mathematically locked into minimizing expected free energy. The hallucination is strictly controlled by the ruthless laws of thermodynamics. If our brain were to randomly generate a hallucination of a green sky, it would create a massive systemic prediction error, capturing our attention that serves no allostatic purpose, wasting massive amounts of metabolic energy and potentially distracting us from something more important. Worse, if our brain decided to hallucinate that gravity didn't apply to us and we stepped off of a cliff, we would die. Our body budget goes bankrupt and our system dissolves into entropy. The reason we consciously, viscerally feel that jumping off a cliff will hurt us is because it is in the absolute best interest of our entire distributed brain to be completely unified on that fact. We do not have the freedom to hallucinate whatever we want because we only consciously perceive what the brain determines is useful. In the same vein, we should say, I don't know, biologically useful. In the same vein, we do not have an experience of predicting, of calculating thermodynamic math, or of consciously trying to minimize sensory errors to survive. Because being consciously aware of the millions of micro predictions, sensory collisions, and precision weighting calculations happening in your cortex every second would be computationally bankrupting and biologically fatal. We do not need to know how our visual cortex builds a model of a predator. We just need to run away from it. We just need to know when it's there. Therefore, the brain hides its own processing and only broadcasts the final unified conclusion. So, I don't like this last part. The idea that it's hiding something would be inappropriate to say. Okay, I saw a U here. Being consciously aware of the millions of micro predictions would be we do not have, okay, what did I say? You. Did I say your? There it is. Okay, hopefully that was remotely satisfying. How do I want to go about this? I think we have to just do some brute force editing right now, and then we can do some vibe writing. Out of curiosity, do you have a perspective on causal set theory? I probably do not, unfortunately. I don't know what it is, and I probably wouldn't have too much an opinion about it if I knew. Okay, so intuitive aspects of experience. We're trying to talk about these hidden causes, and I want to put forth maybe the brain must compress sensory data into the simplest possible generative model. We don't want to say must here. The brain is compressing into simple heuristics. A good model posits a hidden state, right, that exists independently. Okay. By projecting objectivity outward, the brain mathematically compresses millions of sensory fluctuations to a single highly stable and easily predictable hidden cause. Highly stable, easily predictable. The quality of objectivity. So this is talking about objectivity now. This is not supposed to be here. Feeling that the world is out there and real is just the subjective experience of your generative model achieving massive algorithmic compression to minimize expected free energy. Okay, let's do that. Actually, I did kind of want to talk about this here. Okay. That's good. Two different directions. Now we're at the idea of time. We want the idea of change. We need... So we did a hierarchical depth, I think. How far into the past and future? Temporal depth of hidden causes. So this is going to be something like causality going far into the past / future. Okay. Space and objects, because the brain's generated model is deeply hierarchical. We don't experience raw photons. Yep, we did that. Of self and being alive. Did we care to do that here? No. All right, causal sets. Quantum gravity. Uh-oh. If space-time is fundamentally discrete, and that space-time events are related by a partial order. Yeah, I couldn't even begin to understand what this would imply. Or even mean, for that matter. Yeah, I can't do too much with it without spending a lot of time on it. All right, what was the way I wanted to go about this here? Discussion of the array of hidden causes that our brain predicts and relevant to conscious perception from our perspective effectively generates. We can ground, I see. Considering how we understand time and causality themselves. Oh, and then we can ground this in high-level priors. Self and all that stuff. Oh, so this was all... I feel like truth would come actually before change. So maybe we would just put self here. So let's jump back. All right. Self, intentionality, and truth. Compared to perception. Whoa. Whoa. Are we far away from where we were? Compared to perceptual experiences of the outside world, self-related experiences are remarkably stable. Our perceptions of the world are always changing. Self-related experience seem to change much less. Could we use the self? Oh, this would have been a nice way to move into change. But I don't think that's important here. So I'm going to move that back to, I don't know, self here. Self and freedom. Uh-oh. We got to get out of here. There we go. Stable. My understanding is that causal set theory is a theory of quantum gravity which believes that space-time is discrete, right? And emergent from causal partial orders where some events are logically or temporally prior to other events. Okay. For example, space exists because of the repulsion of matter causes some matter to be extended from other matter, and time exists because it takes time for some matter to move through space. Yeah, I just don't know how to go about that. It seems to me like it would have arguably philosophical implications about the nature of space, time, and causality. Well, once again, we aren't going physicalist here when we're talking about space, time, and causality. These concepts that I'm talking about right now are phenomenological. This is how we understand and experience space and time and causality. That's not the same thing as what we're talking about when we're talking about space, time, and causality in the context of physical events. These are different domains entirely. Okay. What do we have? Okay, temporal depth, time. Just as the brain models space and models time, we experience temporal depth, the feeling of a past causing a present leading to a future. Okay, of note is the experience of change itself. Oh, where was our work discussion? Oh, here it is. Okay. Among the many intuitive but false ideas about perception is that changes in what we perceive correspond directly to changes in the world, but change is another manifestation of the deep structure of perceptual experience. Change in perception is not simply given by change in sensory data. That's a banger. We perceive change through the same principles of best guessing that give rise to all other aspects of perception. Many experiments have shown that physical change in the world, is neither necessary nor sufficient for the change in perception, or for the perception of change. Right. So we've got the optical illusion. Nothing is moving, yet there can be a perceptual impression of movement, especially if you let the eyes rove around the image. What's happening is that the fine details of the picture, when seen in the periphery of your vision, convince your visual cortex to infer motion even though no motion is present. Awesome. All right, the opposite situation, the physical change without perceptual change, happens in change blindness. Okay. We can draw this to change blindness. All right, back to self. Did I want to put something about self here? Self was before this, right? Yeah, I put self here. This is your script, or you're just looking for nuggets, or what? I have, in classic fashion, I have a bunch of notes that are that are roughly categorized, and then I have like a start of a draft, and now I'm making sure that any of these quotes that aren't represented so far in the draft are moved into the place that I want to put them. So this is kind of like a in-between editing round. And yeah. So what happened was that the outline that I had was so chaotic that instead I just typed out what I thought should be the narrative, and then I just let it start writing, and it did a decent job on a lot of ideas, but some of the stuff is missing because it's in the notes, and I didn't say everything that was in the notes, and now I'm making sure that it's accounted for. So this is kind of a crazy way of editing. The golden nugget comes forth from the black hedgehog. The note taker knows who looks towards the sunset. Let it come to night, and let the sage speak, for there is much wisdom in the talks of the masters. Praise Master and Nilseth, absolutely. Or no, but doesn't the physical universe constrain our phenomenal experience? It does. It does constrain our phenomenal experience, but it's really the sensory stimuli that's constraining our phenomenal experience. Anything outside of that is something that the brain now has to model or generate. It's a hidden cause. It's affecting the stimuli that's touching our sensory organs. Can I give you a cool prompt? Yes, you can. But it's got to be cool. All right, what's more, that given that change is itself an aspect of perceptual inference, the brain may attenuate prior expectations related to perceiving changes in the condition of the body in order to further ensure that physiological essential variables stay where they ought to be. In this view, we might not perceive our physiological condition as changing even when it does in fact change. This is more of like an allostasis topic, right? Okay. How do the 17 abidarmic perception citas map onto the weighting between top down and bottom of signals used in perception? Whoa. Yeah, I might as well do the bottom one here. All right. Okay, mapping the 17 citas, the mind moments of the Theravada Abhidharma's cognitive process onto predictive processing requires translating between two distinct epistemic frameworks. The Abhidharma is a first-person phenomenological taxonomy of conscious experience happening sequentially in time. Predictive processing is a third-person computational model of subpersonal brain function operating via continuous bidirectional hierarchical loops. Bidirectional. Okay. Despite the categorical difference, both frameworks reject the passive camera model of perception. Both describe perception as a constructed dynamic sequence where an underlying baseline is perturbed, evaluated, categorized, and reacted to. Okay. So how do these map? Okay. 17 citas. We got past life continuum, vibrating continuum, and arresting continuum. The system is resting in its default generative model, and an unexpected sensory signal generates a prediction error large enough to perturb the system and breaks the current baseline prediction. Okay, so the vibration is what is being used here as the as the current system. And a resting continuum is the current baseline prediction. Adverting is the allocation of precision, attention, to the ascending prediction error. What was adverting here? Sense door adverting. Sense consciousness is the raw arrival of the bottom-up sensory signals at the lowest levels of the cortical hierarchy. Okay. The brain attempts to explain away the prediction error. Top-down predictions meet bottom-up signals, which would be the receiving and investigating. The system settles on a best guess to minimize free energy, resulting in perceptual categorization or posterior belief determining. Okay. Impulsion. 7 moments. 7 moments on impulsion? The system evaluates the percept against interoceptive predictions, which we got valence and expected free energy here. It's leveraging valence to determine how to evaluate. Expected free energy, it's trying to minimize here. It executes a cognitive or physical response in predictive processing. This is habitual policy selection based on prior conditioning. In Abhidhamma, this is the generation of karma. Okay. And then we got model updating, registering attention. The posterior belief becomes the new prior. The generative model is updated based on the resolved perception and the ensuing reaction, laying down the groundwork for future predictions. So the reason why this might be inappropriate is because this is a phenomenological taxonomy. And we don't experience everything that's happening in, underneath the hood when we're talking about predictive processing. So the fact that we're trying to take a phenomenological framework and put it onto predictive processing, which isn't necessarily a phenomenological principle at its heart. The fact that we become conscious and all these things happen, that's above conscious awareness, is developed on top of predictive processing. Predictive processing is a lower level mechanism that certainly developed along with our consciousness, but it's not necessary to include the consciousness discussion. They have similarities, like ratio of bottom up and top down. At least that made me think of it. This is as sophisticated the Buddhists get on perception mechanics. So this is, phenomenal perception, I guess. What it feels like to perceive. Which, once again, if because of predictive processing and the free energy principle, if the brain decides not to make something conscious, then it's not going to hit this framework. So this is a framework of, like, the Abhidhamma is the phenomenology of what actually gets, what's actually important enough in some sense. And the question is, why is it important? And we can only speculate. But Tibetan dream yoga ideas is the other one with similarities about not perceiving the world as it is. Right, that has to be fundamental for whatever view you go with, whether that is the unconscious or the conscious. But yeah, pretty cool. Oh, the high level prior. The bhavanga is the resting unconscious state of the mind that maintains the continuity of the individual, right? The highest levels of the generative model, the deeply ingrained priors that maintain the organism's baseline expectations for survival and continuity. By the way, like, the idea is that the most deeply ingrained prior would be something like truth itself, would be something like objectivity. And we're going to get to that in this section that we're writing. I read the Abhidhamma manual. There are clear dogmas in there, but man, did these go deep on the momentary stuff. They went deep on the momentary stuff. Yeah, that's you know, sure you get to have a much fuller phenomenology when you meditate and can start noticing really complex, noticeable aspects of experience. Okay. Attention is precision waiting. Okay, we gotta. Yeah, this is huge. The Abhidhamma strictly posits that these 17 moments happen linearly, one after another. A single moment of consciousness ceases entirely before the next arises. Predictive processing, conversely, relies on a continuous cascading hierarchy, and it's distributed and yada yada yada. Discrete versus continuous. The Siddha Viti operates in quantized discrete frames of time. Predictive processing models neural dynamics via continuous differential equations. The scope of consciousness. The Abhidhamma treats the entire 17-moment process as a granular breakdown of conscious experience. In predictive processing, much of the prediction error minimization happens entirely subpersonally, unconsciously, with only the finalized posterior belief breaching the threshold into global conscious awareness. And not necessarily, right? It's just, unless we define posterior belief as what makes consciousness. Now we've got like a circular definition. All right, pretty cool stuff. Predictive processing. Well, so predictive processing is a computational framework. Like you know, we're looking at a brain that is just an analog system, and we're trying to interpret what's going on. So the way they do that is by coming up with computational simulations to determine whether we can make sense of this activity. So in those computations, you know, in those simulations, they're using continuous, I don't know, equations for mapping out these dynamics. Which would, you know, once again, predictive processing is below conscious awareness, so you don't, it's not making any case about conscious experience. Predictive processing can be and should be modeled as continuous because that's what actual neural dynamics are operating with. But you could still make that case about phenomenology being discrete because that's a different mechanism in the brain. That's the mechanism that makes things conscious, which would be, as we've discussed, like these theta waves dealing with the salience network and the central executive network determining what gets broadcast. I'm confused. Do you believe there is no ontological truth, or do you believe that ontological truth exists only in experience? Yeah, so if we're going to talk about like some truth, like the only way that I talk about truth is it's what each of our brains commit to in some sense. But that it would be a different truth. Like we wouldn't say it's the same truth for everyone. It's like you could think about truth in that way. This feeling of truth, this feeling of certainty is something that is both, I mean, it's shared in the sense that the feeling is similar, but what actually is the object of that truth would be different for each person. It's simply the affective, emotional reflection of your brain making these predictions and committing to them. In this case, I'm defining truth as like a is 1 + 1 = true. Certainly within our within our norms of math, it is. But what does 1 + 1 = 2 mean to the universe, to the raw, brute, physical universe? Once again, our understanding of the physical world is such that there aren't patterns in the physical world. There's just things happening. You know, there's just events. There's continuous events in some sense. I don't even know if that's even appropriate, right? We don't even know what time, if time has a direction. So there's just the universe. Physically, there's just the universe. There's no patterns. There's no nothing. There's no atoms. There's just matter, maybe. You know, there's just, we could say there's matter, and gravity is more like of a behavioral pattern that we're noticing. Matter kind of just encapsulates everything. Maybe we could say energy. I'm not sure. But you need to be a perceiver to notice a pattern, right? All these patterns are empirical for humans. This is how we perceive the world. We perceive these objects as separate. We don't see all the matter that's actually floating in the air right now. We don't care about that stuff. There's a lot going on in the air right here. A lot that the universe would care about that I don't care about. Right here. See this stuff? You don't. That's not a definition of truth. Yeah, the point is that I'm not going to make a definition of truth. I think that's definitions of truth are these are human, social, pragmatic tools of communication, and not merely to communicate, but to actually affect our behavior and perceptions. So yeah, like it would be weird to make like a definition of truth. Pragmatically, people, to my understanding, generally define truth as facts which correspond to reality. Yeah, that's like colloquially how people use the understanding of truth. And when I'm out in the world, and when we're doing stuff, when we're outside of that bottom layer philosophical zone that I always talk about, then I'm going to use truth in the way that I think that other people that I'm talking to are thinking about the word truth and what it does and what it means. And that would be roughly something like, I don't know, empirical, I don't know, things that we can, you know, I'd have to like jump to the empirical method and statistics. I think that's the whole point. That's why I always jump to the empirical method and statistics and stuff like that. It's what we're allowed to say is true, at some sense. People don't realize that that's how they usually use the word true. They usually just kind of take what people have found, or people have defined already. But yeah, I don't think I could do too much better, unfortunately. All right. We did that on time. Here we go. Like change all our perceptions, experiences of time are controlled hallucinations too. Controlled by what though? Without a dedicated sensory channel, what could provide the equivalent? That would be a good jumping off point. Okay, Warwick's idea is that we infer time based not on the ticking of an internal clock. Right, okay. Record a library of videos of different durations and different context. So this is what we want. Warwick then showed the same videos to an artificial and neural network that mimic the operation of the human visual system. I don't know if this is important, but perhaps mention this in one or two sentences. We want to know whether we could use activity in the visual cortex to predict how long each video seemed. Okay, perhaps fit these next two quotes in one succinct paragraph. All right, how are we doing? 44 pages. We're down to 44. I thought Heidegger defined truth as unconcealment, and my understanding is you subscribe to his philosophy generally. Yeah, so Heidegger uses truth in like a very different way than we think about truth colloquially, which makes it you know, difficult to then like start asserting that we should use it that way. But yeah, he does use it in a way of unconcealment. He's talking about the nature of being itself. And he's really kind of talking about this feeling of certainty, if we were to try to connect it to the underlying physiology. But yeah, Heidegger's use of truth is it's much closer to this idea of our brain disclosing truth as something that you know, is constantly changing and is constantly affected by our concerns, and you know, becomes articulated to us through discourse. And you know, we could go through the whole Heidegger thing, but yeah, I don't think you're going to find much what's the word here? Much comfort in Heidegger's use of truth. You'd have to read Being and Time to appreciate it, and otherwise it's going to just sound like crazy talk. All right, since our internal models are constantly changing due to all the dynamics, blah blah blah, our perception of the world will be constantly different. Maybe we should chill on that for now. I think that's what we would want to move to the next phase when we actually talk about the contingency of our understandings. Okay, affordances. We perceive what those, okay, what they allow us to do. I don't know if we want to go this route. It's more speculative in that sense. A chair is not perceived as it's okay. Perceived as affordances. Okay, makes sense that we perceive the world in terms of what our bodies can do with it to minimize energy. Okay, this is what we would want to say here. Another theory. Oh, this is just the notes. Okay. Then we can discuss the to discuss this in a couple paragraphs using the outfielder instead of the cricket ball. Instead of cricket. I don't know where Anel Seth's from, but we're baseball here. All right. Britain, I think. Is cricket big there? All right, are we ready for some vibe writing? So what happened last here? Is this it? Yeah, okay. Okay. I changed some things and added some directives. some bracketed notes / directives, as well as some quotes that we need to incorporate the essence of, from which we need to incorporate the essence. I don't know. That's definitely not the right way to say it. All right. It was birthed there. Wow. Okay. Well, then no wonder. All right. I don't know if anyone remembers when we used to work on the document on this channel. But here we go. Vibewriting. So yeah, I go through, I leave some directives, I add some notes, and bada bing, we're gonna get something good, I hope. It's gonna help us out. I've completely dissolved the Anil Seth quotes into the narrative prose, capturing the exact scientific mechanics of his studies without breaking the flow. I've also structured it smoothly to escalate from static objects to change to time and finally to physical action. Okay. The result of this conscious prediction error minimizing loop is the vivid, undeniable conscious experience of being a stable self looking out at an objective world. Oh, did this change? While we can only speculate exactly why evolutionary algorithms settled on this specific phenomenological interface, we can clearly trace how the brain's demand for algorithmic compression generates the most pervasive. So we got to be a little bit more chill here. We can clearly trace how the brain's I don't know, fundamental allostatic drives. What did this say? Generates, drive, generates, effects. We should use the most pervasive, intuitive aspects of our daily reality. Standibular, the mandibular. We gotta look that one up. The mandibular, or lower jawbone, is the largest, strongest facial bone, crucial for chewing, speech, and facial structure. Very nice. Very nice indeed. How's it going, Daniel End? I'm gonna get going. Good talking to you. Absolutely, Energy Dompter. Enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, okay. Oh, I see. This threw it here. All right, we want to have a discussion about the blah blah blah. Yeah, we still want this type of discussion here. Remember that the brain's generative model is deeply hierarchical. The lowest levels of neural systems process raw, chaotic sensory noise like millions of fluctuating photons hitting the retina. But the higher levels of the brain do not care about photons. They are actively compressing that sensory data into highly stable, easily predictable heuristics. That's not what they're doing. That's tricky. I might have even said that wrong. Yeah, this is what I said. Ah, I'm giving it bad information. Do not care about photons. They are generating highly stable, easily predictable heuristics. That's not great. I don't know what they're working with. Okay, so rather than a chaotic stream of light, we experience the abstracted hidden cause, a solid chair sitting in a three-dimensional room. That's nicer. At the absolute top of this predictive hierarchy sit our highest level priors, massive foundational assumptions like, we wouldn't want to say intentionality before we say the self. Like, maybe like objecthood, the self, and even the notion of truth itself. In this light, the quality of objectivity, the visceral feeling the world is out there and real, is simply the subjective experience of our generative model achieving massive algorithmic compression to efficiently minimize free energy. I don't like this, but that's coming from this, right? But what would we want to keep from this? I'm gonna have to put some thought into this one. Put thought into this one. All right, to maintain this stable. Nah, this is not a good transition either. How would be an effective way to transition to the idea, to the discussion of change? What would be an effective way? All right, the brain. Notably, we must distinguish between changing perception. Okay, physically. Physically, your sensory data is wildly unstable. Your eyes are constantly darting. We should always say our, I think. Our eyes are constantly darting around. I'm not going to say this word. Our head is moving and lighting is shifting, yet, the world feels completely stable because the brain actively edits out. So once again, we cannot do that. Yet the world feels stable. We only consciously perceive change when our brain's high-level model decides that a relevant hidden cause has shifted. Yeah, that's fine. No, I think that this is better actually. All right, this editing process explains bizarre phenomenological phenomena, psychological phenomena, where observers completely fail to notice massive alterations in their environment. if the change happens slowly or alongside other distractions. The sensory data changed, but the brain's high-level prediction did not, so the consciousness remained static. This explains bizarre psychological phenomena like change blindness. Okay, this explains change blindness. Phenomena of change blindness, where we completely fail to notice massive alterations in our environment. If a change happens, if a change in perception happens slowly or alongside other distractions, the sensory data changes, but the brain's high-level prediction does not. So the consciousness remains. So conscious experience remains static. So the consciousness never registers the change. Conversely, optical illusions, like static geometric patterns that appear to rotate or wave, occur when fine details in our peripheral vision create sensory uncertainty. To resolve the error, your visual cortex applies a motion prior, creating a perceptual impression of movement where none actually exists. We have to change the wording there. This is crazy. Change the wording here to be more accessible. Physical change without perceptual change happens in change blindness. This occurs when some aspects change very slowly. Optical illusion. Nothing is moving, yet there can be a perceptual impression of movement, especially if you let your eyes... Okay, what's happening is that the fine details of the picture, when seen in the periphery of your vision, convince your visual to infer motion, even though no... That's so much better here. Maybe we can just even use that. All right. I'm actually going to just take this whole thing. All right. Furthermore, just as the brain infers space and change, it's not that it must, because this is just a human, you know, a nice human feature. We experience the feeling of a past causing a present that leads to a future. But what about, but without a dedicated sensory organ for time, how does the brain? And what do we have here? Without a, but given that the brain doesn't have a centralized objective internal clock ticking away in the background, how does it generate this hallucination? Nice. Cognitive neuroscientists, blah, 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 blah. Research demonstrates that the brain, that our feeling of time is an active prediction based on the accumulated rate. Ooh, based on the accumulated rate of perceptual changes across our senses. I think I'm going to go with this one. Okay, this is fine because then we can just show what we mean. When researchers asked volunteers to estimate the duration of various videos, human perception predictably now we could just do that here. People consistently overestimated the length of busy, chaotic scenes and underestimated quiet scenes. Remarkably, when the researchers, so when asked volunteers to estimate, when asked to estimate the duration of various videos, research volunteers, maybe we just say volunteers. When volunteers were asked to estimate the duration of various videos, they consistently, this is a sense of style change, shout out Pinker. Okay. Remarkably, when researchers fed these same videos into an artificial neural network trained solely on visual processing with no internal timing mechanism whatsoever, the AI exhibited the exact same temporal biases as the humans. And I might want to grab and mimic the operation of the visual system. No, this is fine. Furthermore, fMRI scans reveal that a human subjective experience of time can be accurately predicted just by looking at the activity in their visual cortex. Time is not a clock we read, it is a best guess generated by how fast our perceptual models are updating. Time appears to be overall. Time appears to be a best guess generated by how fast all right. And what do we get after this? 43. We're still at 43. We haven't gained too much here. Finally, because we know now that perception is ultimately for the sake of action, we can make sense of how we physically interface with objects. Oh, I actually like this. Well, no, it's that perception is action, but I guess. both action and for the sake of action. We can make sense of how we physically interface with these objects in space and time. That's not really what I'm going for. All right, I have to use the restroom, so I will be back in about 2 to 3 minutes. So BRB. Okay, let's continue. So after a hazard, we perceive the world strictly in terms of what our bodies can do with it. So I feel like this is I seeded this thing with it with language that I'm not stoked about. Let me just say this more appropriately. This dynamic is captured by William Powers' perceptual control theory, which flips our standard intuition on its head. We do not perceive things in order to figure out how to behave. Rather, we behave in order to control what we perceive. In this spirit, No, actually, this is okay. This dynamic is captured by William Power's perceptual control theory. Which flips our standard intuition on its head. We behave in order to control what we perceive. We don't have to say this. We can just go straight into it. Consider a baseball outfielder catching a fly ball. The intuitive assumption is that the brain calculates the ball's trajectory, figures out where it will land, and commands the body to run there. But this is not what anyone does. But this is not how the brain actually works. Instead, the fielder moves their body continuously to ensure the ball looks a certain way, specifically adjusting their running speed so that the ball's visual angle in their field of vision increases at a steadily decreasing rate. If they maintain that specific visual perception, physics guarantees they will intercept the ball. Okay. Now, this might be... Alright, this is great. The fielder's actions are not about finding out where the ball is. They're geared towards controlling how the ball perceptually appears. Perception in this situation is a controlling hallucination just as much as it is a controlled one. I'm guessing that's what he said here. No, that was something that our writing added. Nice. All right. Let's compare this for a real quick. We don't perceive things in order to behave. Instead, we, as the example of, we behave so that we end up perceiving things in a particular way. All right, that's fine. Now consider a more active example. Yep, you might think best way. But figuring out what's there is not in fact a good strategy. Instead, you should keep moving so that the ball always looks the same. But this is not actually an effective strategy. Instead, the fielder moves their body continuously to ensure that the ball looks a certain way, specifically adjusting their running speed so that the ball's visual angle in their field of vision increases at a steadily decreasing rate. We gotta say this. Can we say this more accessibly? If you follow this, call it you're guaranteed to intercept the ball. I'm going to say simply they are guaranteed to intercept the ball, to catch the ball. Your actions and your brain's predictions about are not finding out where the ball is. They are geared towards controlling how the ball perceptually appears according to your perceptual experience. Will not reveal a precise location of the ball, but something like its catchability as you run toward it. Perception in this situation is a controlling hallucination just as much as it's controlled. Okay. are more geared towards controlling the ball, how the ball appears, than finding out where the ball is. Meditation's good. I think we just hit 23, the big 23. Just hit the 23. What else is new? Yes, I think as I mentioned, I was doing some of the Goldstein guided meditations on waking up, and then some just not non-guided. What do I experience? I think it's nothing too crazy. It's just I just do the thing, you know, whatever the intention is, whether I'm focusing on the breath or I'm focusing on what arises. I just do that, and that's it. Nothing crazy. Notice just anything that happens during that. Yeah, it's always cool hearing Goldstein talk about that stuff, because he's always like, he always makes it sound so simple. It's always reassuring. Just the idea that, like, if your mind starts to wander, just notice it. That's it. No big deal. All right, we just got rid of stuff, but we're still at 43. If this feels dialed in, we're okay. I'm gonna give it through one more. Okay, we need to go through this version this once more, as I'm not thrilled about these parts yet. Try to make it as effective of a narrative as possible, perhaps even regardless of the wording that I've added. For the hulls, try to make what you add as effective of a narrative as possible, perhaps even regardless of the wording that I've added. And then I gotta paste this. Oh, there's a lecture series from him online about the Satipatthana Sutta, same area as the book. Yeah, unfortunately, the book I've slowed down on, though I am gonna still finish it for sure. And that's mainly been because that other book is so crazy, and I'm so interested in the other book right now. Awesome. Clearly knowing and meditation on parts of the... That's it. And parts of the... Wow. Okay, I'm actually going to save this. How do I save this? Save playlist? It is a playlist. Nice. Thank you for sending that. Best viewers deleted. I was digging those for a while. His podcasts with Sam are great. Oh, I didn't realize he had podcasts with Sam. That's cool. Like lecture version of the book. Cool. Or are you saying that that's what the podcast is like, the lecture version of the book? I'm guessing it's more like that than a... Oh, there are two best viewers. Then like guided meditations. Okay, that's what the playlist was. Nice. Very cool. Yo, chia, tahini, flax seeds. How's it going? Shout out. Oh, oh boy. Oh, Sam Harrison, Joe's. Oh, 7 hours. What is this? Oh, this is a compilation of 4 fascinating conversations between Sam Harrison and Joseph Goldstein from the Waking Up podcast. We've got 2014, 2015, 17, and 2018. Okay, this I'm gonna check this out. I'm gonna throw this somewhere good. Save that to watch later. This video got me into meditation, actually. Wow, hearing how deep it goes, hearing Sam talk about Dzogchen. Very nice. So does that mean like Goldstein and Harris are like your meditation parents? They're like the source. Just like how, for better or for worse, Jordan Peterson will always be my philosophy daddy. Unfortunately. Or fortunately, we'll see. Because I was atheist back then. I see. Definitely Sam. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Some people will spend their whole lives looking for the goose who lays the golden egg. But the wise one knows that the sugar glider who beckons from these trees is the same as the albino anteater who lays the golden path. And if you don't know what that means, then I just can't help you, you know? How'd you get the ugly sweater? It's a nice looking sweater. All right. Has it helped us out? I know this has happened before, and usually I just get tired of it and we can just move on to the next section, but we'll see. Why is the question? Why? Why does a biological error correction algorithm feel like anything at all? While we may never know exactly... No, I want to say this still, like, while we can only speculate. I feel like this is... We've already answered this. We can clearly trace how the brain's fundamental allostatic drive generates the most pervasive intuitive... Didn't I say this already? Okay, that's fine. Well, we can only speculate exactly why. Evolution settled on this specific phenomenological interface, this specific human experience. We can clearly trace how the brain's fundamental allostatic drive affects the most pervasive intuitive aspects of our daily life. You could get it by sharing a clip during Holiday Hoopia 2025. Wow. Nice. I guess anywhere across Twitch. Yeah, I'm actually quite I'm a Twitch noob in the sense that I never actually watch streams. To understand what the brain ends up consciously broadcasting, to understand what the brain ends up consciously broadcasting, maybe. We must remember that its generative model is deeply hierarchical. What am I trying to get at here? Maybe I should just put in this work. Just think about it. It's less about, we don't care about the hierarchy here. We really want to make the case that we must remember that the human brain developed complexity over accuracy, something like that. Dot, dot, dot. Explain this a little bit. And, okay, that's fine. Explain this a little bit and how it relates to highly abstracted, abstract hidden causes. Okay, so rather than that, even the notion of truth itself, and this, like, the qualia of objectivity. Did we want to even talk about this, actually? We could just say this without going into objectivity. In this light, the visceral, unshakable feeling that the world is out there and undeniably real is simply the subjective experience of our generative model successfully achieving I don't know if achieving. Something massive algorithmic, massive compression, something compression here. No, we don't want to talk about compression. Compression's not the way to go about this. Because compression implies that there's like some... that we're starting with the sensory signals and then we're compressing. We want to get off... we just want to get on these abstract heuristics. Abstracted hidden causes. Heuristics. Where did I say heuristics here? There we go. Visceral, unshakable feeling that the world is out there and undeniably real is simply of our okay. And then that's a question that I still have because this isn't effective enough, notably. Okay, physically. It's wildly unstable. Change in perception is not simply given by change in sensory data. All right. Conversely, like static, okay, occur when fine details create sensory ambiguity. Ambiguity. Yikes. To resolve the prediction error, the visual cortex predicts that motion is occurring. Resulting in the conscious hallucination of movement where none physically exists. Okay, okay. What else do we have? All the way down. Following. Pen. Hazard, follow. Okay, if perception is fundamentally driven by active inference, then it mathematically follows that we would not perceive. Then it follows, we don't have to say mathematically. No, let's actually just do this. Then it follows that we would not perceive a neutral universe. How about, let's just say this, we perceive the world in terms, perceive the world in terms of what our body can do to it to survive. I don't know if it's to it, it's more like with it. The conscious world is full of affordances rather than mere objects. Map of opportunities and the threats, highlighting exactly what we can possibly do. This dynamic is perfectly captured by William Powers' perceptual control theory, which flips our standard intuition on its head. Okay. Instead, the fielder moves their body continuously to ensure that the ball looks a certain way, specifically adjusting their running speed. So the ball appears to rise. The ball appears to rise at a steady, constant pace against the background sky. Which it used to be visual angle in their field of vision increases at a steadily decreasing rate. Increases at a... Okay. Nice. If they continually adjust their physical movement to maintain that specific visual perception, the physics guarantee they will catch the ball. And I still want to go. They were guaranteed to catch the ball. All right, nice. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to take that whole thing, and I'm going to just throw it into the same... I'm going to edit as opposed to write a new one, because it's not going to know any better. And then I might call it. And then I will be working on this incessantly tomorrow and the next days. Oh, I'm not going to be streaming tomorrow. I got to move this. Stream. Oh, we didn't do post hoc rationalization. Okay, we got to move these. Boom, 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 boom. We might even push him back. I'm not sure. Stana. Ayo. Oh, I should have kept stream here. That's unfortunate. I gotta not jump into these huge projects, as I always seem to do. But this is I'm actually pretty stoked about this because this is making me rethink about how we should talk about these things in the document. Honestly, it might even be beneficial to just throw this video essay into the document, as it effectively does what the document's supposed to do in the science of experience. Just more effectively. Like, this is drawing on so much more context about how we used to think about these things and why we think about it now. Like, in the document, it was pretty much just a, this is how we understand the world now. And the problem is that people just might not believe me. They might just be like, "What? This guy's telling me that it's predictive processing. What the hell is predictive processing?" And now, through this lens, we get to see there's a lot more ethos to this argument. There's a lot more substance there, and it makes more sense if you're just following along. And then we get to the same types of conclusions, and perhaps in the document I could spend more time on those. But we shall see. We shall see. All right, I think I'm actually going to call it right here. Thanks for chilling, everyone. Thanks for being cool, for vibing out. Yo, that comment on the new vid 2 hours ago. Which one? Are we talking about 2 hours ago? Oh, this one? Yeah, this is funny. I don't know if I don't know if this is my biggest fan or a hater. I just don't know. What the hee hee? Or the heh? Like none of these are actually like toxic. They're always like kind of in between. They're so it's kind of funny. So I gave it a nice like. And yeah, I'm not gonna even try. Prove me wrong. I will not prove you wrong. Yeah, I don't like. I still have to figure out how I want to go about the idea of debates and stuff like that in this space, because it just seems so miserable, and I feel like I'm at such a disadvantage where anyone that debates me on these things is able to just leverage how compelling just very simple like explanations sound, and that works, idealism type conversations, physicalism type conversations, very simple. You can just go to your thing. You could do that. But the type of argument I try to make here is requires us to like look at all this. It's like requires us to have both this like physicalist side of knowledge about the neuroscience, but then also have like the phenomenological idealist side to like create like a holistic picture. And then I only arrive at the linguistic stuff because of I think the wisdom of these linguistic philosophers. They kind of jump above it all. And that's something I got to learn how to communicate effectively. Debates are miserable. What's the argument for that? Why are debates miserable? It's just such an uphill battle. Maybe I can be effective at it. I'd have to just be much more practiced. I would rather discussion. I feel like discussions are just more effective, or at least are more in my wheelhouse. Maybe they're less effective. Maybe they're less effective for getting this channel bigger. Maybe I should start debating people just for clout. Debates are actually useless for changing minds, right? Well, it depends who we're trying to change the mind of. Like, given that we are an influencer and we're going to have other people hearing this, then perhaps it's for changing the listeners' minds rather than the person I'm actually debating with. But that just feels weird. It feels like disingenuous. Prove me wrong does not work. Right. Anyone who says prove me wrong, I just don't want to engage. And the other thing is, like, my argument is that I couldn't possibly prove them wrong. This isn't something that I could prove someone wrong on. Like, at the base level here, I'm arguing about how we ought to think and talk about these things. And I can't prove my way is right. How about you prove yourself right first, buddy? True. That's the other thing. I would assert that they could not possibly prove themselves right. That's something that I would be able to say. Okay. Let's call it. Hopefully I've inched forward by Thursday or by Wednesday. By Wednesday, hopefully I'm done phase 9. Please. Phase 10 should be chill. Phase 10 is my wheelhouse. Phase 9, we're still in like the difficult minefield of making sure we're absolutely precise about how we're speaking about these ideas. Phase 10, I'm at home. We're chilling. Splendid show. Hell yeah. Just wait until this thing is done and ready. And then we have to try to see if we could reduce. So we're at 24 here. So maybe 30 is now. We're hoping to reduce down to 30 pages, which should be about a little over an hour, I think. Which is not the worst thing in the world, you know? This does what it tells you it's going to do. Like, this is This video will trace the historical progression of how we have explained and understood perception, beginning with the earliest philosophical foundations and moving through time as these models evolved. We will end up at the absolute front lines of contemporary science, at which point the intuitive everyday understanding of perception will be left far behind, replaced by an explanation far more counterintuitive, biologically grounded, and profoundly useful. So I need to make sure that we hit the useful at some point here. But yeah, we will do it. We will actually have this in the video. So it might take a while. Might be a good hour. All right. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for chilling. Thanks for lurking. Thanks for being there.